Today, we're talking about the history of blood and blading in wrestling. Blood, blood in wrestling, also known as getting color, juicing, gigging, or in Japan, Ohio, goes back to the 1950s primarily, when it became popular. Now, they didn't blade back then. What they do when it became popular in the 50s is they take a fork and they tenderize part of their face. So then when they'd hit them, they'd pop it open and they'd bleed. Now, I typically did this in the middle of the match when the sweat was pouring, so the blood would just pour down their face. Now, I highly recommend you do this at home, so that way your significant other or parent can see you bleed and take pity on you. Just try not to bleed too much and end up in the hospital. And remember, the more you know, the more you can do at home. Now, blading, on the other hand, is the art of taking a razor blade or a razor blade tip and slicing your forehead open and bleeding a lot. That generally became popular near the late 70s, early 80s. It was easier than popping somebody open the old-fashioned way, which not many wrestlers today know how to do. Wrestlers in the 70s and 80s still knew how to do it. And Mick Foley said Terry Funk still knew how to do it. Too bad Terry Funk's dead. But we can ask his ghost if we have a Ouija board. But blading, some people have deep blading scars, like Abdullah the Butcher, who they say can put quarters in his blading scars. You can see blading scars on Ric Flair. You can see blading scars on Jon Moxley. You can see blading scars on Devon Dudley, or whatever name he's going by now. Britt Baker bladed so bad in her match with Thunder Rosa, the No Set Lights Out match, that she almost had to go to the hospital. Eddie Guerrero bladed so bad in a match once that he passed out afterwards. So blading is kind of dangerous. But all wrestling companies, it seems, have banned the act of blood in wrestling at some point. WWF did it in the 80s at one point, and again in the 90s at one point, and again in the PG era at one point. Always coming back to saying blood is allowed again, just we don't want to see a lot of it. Except in the Attitude Era when they said, you can bleed all you want, damn it. We want lots of blood. ECW never said blood was not allowed. But when they were on TNN, they said, let's cut back on the blood. And that was a network decision, not an ECW decision. WCW said no blood during the 80s and early 90s, and actually fired 2 people at one point because they bled in a match. Now, TNA at one point canceled blood. But what happened was, the network said, don't show so much blood after Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan got in a match where they were half naked and bleeding all over the place. So then TNA went to black and white when there was blood, and then they canceled blood. And then they did a barbed wire match with no blood, which is really interesting to watch. I highly recommend. It's got Santana and Ortiz versus the Ohio Valley Maniacs or whatever they are. And it's a bloodless barbed wire match. I highly recommend watching this. It's disappointing because there's no blood, but it's incredibly insane to watch because they're hitting all these barbed wire spots and there's no blood at all in the match. It's insane. So there was no blood in TNA for a while, and now they went back to saying, yes, there can be blood again. AEW's never said there can't be blood. They've had blood in AEW since the beginning. And that's what made WWF and TNA say, okay, there can be blood again. So yes, that's basically the history of blood in wrestling. Next week we'll do something else. Hell if I know. But join me next week where we do Hell if I know, and we'll have fun doing it because it's a wrestling show, and I don't know what we're gonna do.